Hey everyone, welcome back to my first impressions of One Piece. This is a new series I started recently where I go through each saga in One Piece and offer my thoughts on the narrative, character development, and whatever else I fancy talking about. This video is the second half of my coverage of the Alabasta saga, so if you missed my previous video, you may want to check that out first and then come back after. Or not, I don't know, you're tough, you'll figure it out. But since this video is a long one and I offered plenty of setup in my previous video, let's cut the intro short and get going. The Alabasta arc is the final arc of the Alabasta saga, which consists of 39 episodes from the total 67 episodes for this saga overall, not including Koby's wacky training adventures. This is a big arc to try and break down. I'm gonna do my best, but I may miss a couple beats you might want me to talk about. Honestly, there's so much I can say about this arc, and that's kind of what makes it so good. This is what everything has been building to since the Straw Hats arrived at Whiskey Peak. They're closing in on Alabasta and on Crocodile. But when they arrive, the situation gets much more complex, and the narrative expands to flesh out the land of Alabasta to make it feel like a complicated political environment with a rich history. Let's start from just before the Straw Hats arrive in the Kingdom of Alabasta. In Mr. 2's quest to go kill Mr. 3, he comes across the Straw Hats and in a turn of events ends up on their ship for a time where they become fast friends. He also reveals he can disguise himself as anyone he touches, which they all think is really cool. He then departs and Vivi realizes he was with Baroque Works and now he can disguise himself as all of them, except Sanji, who he didn't meet. They all take it as a blessing that they ran into him now, so they can prepare a deterrent in the form of the white bands they wear around their arms so they can always identify the real them. Worth mentioning because that's why they wear the bands in this arc, and it's also a good way for the narrative to visually represent their friendship as it becomes an overarching theme. Also, I just wanted to say that I really like the character of Mr. 2, even though I feel like I might be in the minority, but we'll get to that much later. Mr. 2 showing up is not when things get complicated though. Oh no. The real complexity comes when the Straw Hats touch down in Alabasta at the port city of Nanohana, where the entire crew immediately gets separated, Captain Smoker and his marines are searching for them there, and oh yeah, Luffy has an older brother who is badass as all hell. Literally, he is a flame person. So naturally, he and Smoker both end up at a bar together, about to fight, when Luffy runs straight into them in his desperate search for food. I love how immediately this arc throws a couple of wild cards into the mix. It makes everything much more unpredictable. Also, I'm gonna talk about Ace, don't worry, but first, I want to talk about Captain Smoker. In my video on the East Blue Saga, I stopped talking about the arcs after Baratie. I never covered Arlong Park nor Logtown, so I've never gotten to share my thoughts on Smoker. Now, I don't know why, but I feel like this guy is going to be one of my favorite characters in the show at some point. I know that may sound weird, but I've been drawn to him even though there's not really much to cling on to. He's very gruff and keeps to himself, but what we have learned from him is that he sees something in Luffy, something he wants to keep his eye on. I feel like it's only a matter of time until he gets some big character payoff, and you can even tell that at the end of the previous saga. He so clearly is going to serve some larger purpose that is surely going to make me cry. He hasn't yet though, so he's not one of my favorite characters, but I really love seeing him on screen the limited chances we get. Sorry, just had to interject my weird love letter to Smoker. Now I'll continue onward with the plot and talk about Ace. Ace is so fucking cool. I love his design. He looks exactly like what the older brother of Luffy should look like, and his interactions with Luffy feel really genuine. Despite how badass Ace is, I think his inclusion in the section actually gives the viewer valuable insight into Luffy's relationship with his crew. When Luffy and Ace are catching up, Luffy begins telling Ace all about his crew, which almost evolves into bragging, but it's clear that he just genuinely is so happy to have each of them, and one of his lines explains his joy perfectly.
Everyone in my crew is so interesting!
Then there's a especially heartwarming moment where Ace meets the rest of the Straw Hats and apologizes for his brother's behavior. Even though the crew were all just complaining about Luffy, when Ace arrives, they refuse to badmouth their captain to his older brother, even when pressed by Ace in a loving way. That is such a great moment for the crew, and Ace even acknowledges that they are good people. This all may feel like minutia, and that's because it is. But it's small character moments like these that inform the viewer how the main characters feel about each other that make shows like these especially fun to watch. We're so used to seeing the Straw Hats as a cohesive unit by this point that by throwing a wild card like Ace into the mix, his presence naturally tells us a bit more about the inner dynamics of the team, and that's something I really like to see. Ace doesn't stay for long though. He's on a quest to hunt down Blackbeard, and we get some talk about how Ace wants to make his captain, Whitebeard, king of the pirates over Luffy, which foreshadows some confrontation between the brothers in the future, and then Ace fucks up some Baroque Works ships with his Fire Fist and says goodbye. From here, we move into a trek through the desert to get to the rebellion and inform them of Crocodile's plot, while we get some flashback info on Vivi's life growing up as the princess. Some stuff happens in the desert that really isn't important, largely filler, and surprisingly, the most consequential of them all is meeting a pervert camel who helps out the crew for the rest of this arc and is kind of a total dick who I love. My feelings on Eyelash aside, we learn that Vivi had a friendship with Koza, who is now the rebel leader, when they were children. Upon arriving at the city of Yuba in the present day, we see that it is largely abandoned and all the water has dried up. The one person who remains, still digging for water, is Todo, Koza's father, who has lost a great deal of weight in the 3 years since the nationwide drought began. Todo invites them all to stay the night and informs them where the current Rebel HQ is. While the others are getting settled for bed, Luffy stays with Todo and tries to help him dig for water. This interaction leaves an impression on Luffy, as he respects the old man's faith and tenacity in the face of the uncompromising desert. This will be important later. The Straw Hats depart from Yuba and Luffy begins a fight with Vivi. Luffy essentially has to smack some sense into her and let her know that she isn't carrying this burden alone any longer, and that all the Straw Hats are willing to put their lives on the line to fight for her cause. This is a great character beat between the two of them. It really showcases Luffy and the Straw Hats' commitment to their promise and friendship with Vivi, but it also serves as a revelatory moment for Vivi. She isn't in this alone anymore. She has people who care about her and are willing to die for her cause. Luffy then declares it would be best for them to go straight to Crocodile right now rather than going to the rebels so that they can stop the conflict at the source, and because Luffy desperately wants to kick Crocodile's ass. So Rain Base is their next destination. I should also say that going on in the background of all this desert trekking, Crocodile has been informing the agents of Baroque Works about his true identity and his master plan for manipulating the Civil War in Alabasta. Before the Straw Hats arrive at his giant casino, the agents are already beginning the final push that will ignite the war. Meanwhile, since Smoker is no dope, except when it comes to having any awareness of his surroundings, the Marines are waiting for the Straw Hats in Rain Base, and almost in the exact same way Luffy alerted them back in Nanohana, Luffy and Usopp both run into Smoker while trying to get some water, and the entire crew gets chased around the city by Marines once again. Since the crew really has no other option, they decide to run headfirst into Crocodile's base with Smoker following behind them, and they all get caught in a trapdoor and fall into a cage. Well, not everyone. Sanji, Chopper, and Vivi are all still outside trying to escape Baroque Works and the Marines. I want to slow down here and focus in on Rain Base, because a hell of a lot happens which sets the stage for the rest of this arc. It is here that Luffy meets Crocodile for the first time, Vivi confronts Crocodile, Crocodile explains his grand plan, and Sanji, avoiding Mr. 2 and speaking with Crocodile on the transponder snail at Little Garden, all coalesce. I haven't really talked about Crocodile at all yet, and these episodes are where we really get to see him in action for the first time. I'm tempted to kind of dislike the character of Crocodile, because to me he feels a bit like a cliché Bond villain, but when I think about it, although he feels cliché to me, he doesn't feel cliché in the context of the overall story. In fact, Crocodile feels utterly unique when compared to all the prior villains in the series. He's a pirate, but he's one without a real crew, and instead relies on his underworld organization and secrecy to fulfill all his schemes. He's like a one-piece mob boss, and I think he was directly inspired by Western cinematic villains, particularly those in the same vein as a Bond villain, because the guy has a crazy elaborate base in the bottom of a casino with a massive tank of alligators, trapdoors, and death traps littered throughout. If he didn't have the crazy Sand Devil Fruit powers, he'd fit right into a more wacky Bond film. So although my temptation to dislike him still remains, I will give Crocodile a pass, and I think the motivations that are revealed later in the arc help to make him a more well-rounded character, although, for the majority, he's a bit stereotypical based on the kind of generic villains I'm used to seeing. Back at the capital city of Alabarna, we get to see the king receive Vivi's message that Crocodile is behind everything. Shortly after, we see Mr. 2, disguised as the king, go to where Koza is stationed and trick everyone into thinking that the king has actually been using dance powder in order to steal the nation's reign for himself. Then, with the help of Mr. 1 and Miss Doublefinger, he launches an attack on the city and gets away, with the citizens furious at what was revealed. This is the final straw, and I love how this was all set up because it makes both sides sentimental, which makes the whole story even more tragic. From Koza's point of view, we couldn't possibly expect him to act any other way, and with the king being kidnapped by Baroque Works and the rebel army marching on the capital, we really can't expect the royal army to do anything but their sworn duty to protect the capital city. The stage is set for a civil war that will decimate the nation.
If you listen closely, I wager you can hear the howls of the kingdom. They all scream the same thing. Protect Alabasta. Protect Alabasta. Protect Alabasta.
This is what a grinning crocodile says after explaining his plan to Vivi and the other Straw Hats and Smoker, who are his captive audience. He then tosses the key to their cage to a banana gator and begins to flood the room, inviting Vivi to try and save her friends or try and warn the rebels of his plan. Classic Bond villain stuff right here. However, a mysterious man named Mr. Prince calls Crocodile and taunts him on the transponder snail, a voice he recognizes from his call to Little Garden. Sanji uses this call to trick Crocodile into leaving his base so that Crocodile can chase down Chopper while Sanji frees everyone at the last second. The crew barely escapes the flood, and Zoro pulls Smoker out of the water with the rest. Sanji questions why he would do that, as does Smoker when he recovers, and it's revealed that Luffy commanded Zoro to save Smoker during the flood. From here, Smoker allows the Straw Hats to flee and orders off the Marines. He then recuses himself from this hunt and puts Tashigi in command. I fucking love this. Smoker is so utterly confused by Luffy that he actually feels he has to distance himself from the situation. Ooh, something's gonna happen with Smoker. I just know it. Luffy stays behind at Rain Base to battle Crocodile and orders the rest of the crew to travel with Vivi to Alabarna as they escape on a giant sand crab who also so happens to be a perv. What is it with this desert? Anyway, so here we are. The fight with Crocodile and Luffy's first real loss. Thank Christ, Luffy gets fucked up in this fight. Don't get me wrong, I like Luffy, but seeing him win every single fight up to this point had gotten really old, and it was refreshing to see him get totally fucked up. He does piss Crocodile off, which I love, but he is ill-equipped to handle Crocodile at this point, and the shot of him with Crocodile's hook through his chest is a really powerful image. Although this isn't a long fight, nor the end of the fights between these two characters, this did provide a nice unique story beat for Luffy and established Crocodile as a real threat that will need to be taken down with more than Luffy's standard brute force tactics. In the aftermath, it is Miss All Sunday who saves Luffy and drops some interesting little tidbit about people with the middle initial D that I'm still dying to know more about, but don't you dare spoil anything in the comments. This interaction both adds to her personal mystique, but pairs Luffy up with Pell, a royal guard with bird fruit powers who Miss All Sunday beat the crap out of earlier in order to kidnap Vivi. I really like the design for Pell. He's a cool character and seems like an overall chill dude. That's really all I have to say about him though, for now. From here, let's focus in on the rest of the Straw Hats for a bit and their confrontations with the Baroque work agents at Alabarna. First, the fact that Karu shows up with a previously unmentioned supersonic duck squad is so stupid and delivered so seriously that I love it. After this, we have all the Straw Hats cloak up and approach Alabarna on their respective supersonic ducks, with the Baroque work agents awaiting their arrival. However, because of the cloaks, they cannot tell which one is Vivi, and the Straw Hats all split up, which forces the Baroque Works agents to split up as well. All of these different fights deserve their own focus, but first, Vivi actually stayed behind on Karu, and only after Baroque Works fell for their plan does she charge out in front of the city before the rebel army. It's at this point while watching that I still found myself wondering, how is Vivi gonna stop them? Will Koza stop for her, or just keep moving? And as the 2 million men drew closer, I was very worried she was going to be trampled to death, and as tragic and heartbreaking as it was, I really liked how this scene played out. Right as Koza catches the image of someone, a cannonball explodes in the sand between them, creating a cloud the rebel army can't see through, and Koza passed right by an unseen Vivi, who is then trampled by the oncoming army, but Karu jumps in to shield her. This begins what becomes a series of increasingly unfortunate events for Vivi that occur from here on out, as no matter what she does, she is seemingly unable to stop this bloodshed. I'll come back to Vivi, but now I want to focus in on the Straw Hats. The first full fight that we see is Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four versus Chopper and Usopp. This battle is probably the best in regards to character development that any of the Straw Hats have in this arc. I'd put Nami's at second, Zoro's at third, and Sanji's at the bottom. So now is a good time for me to talk about Chopper, since I really didn't focus in on him much during his introductory arc in the last video. This is Chopper's first real adventure as part of the crew, and he is thrown into an absolute clusterfuck. But this arc has a great subtle opening for him. Before things get started, Chopper asks the crew what he can do to help, and Usopp tells him to do whatever he can. This is something he clearly takes to heart, as he even mentions it to himself at the start of his fight with Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas while he is still fighting them on his own, and he concludes his vow to do his best with a declaration that he is a pirate. I feel like Chopper doesn't get as much love, so I just wanted to call out this nice bit of development from him. It also really sets him up as the kid brother of the crew, which is a role I think he plays really well. It's unique and works with his personality. Shout out to Chopper, the first member after the Core 5. The fight isn't all him though. Usopp gets some serious time to shine in this one. I'm not going to get into too much detail on the actual fighting, as when I'm discussing these, I'm interested in conveying my thoughts on the characters, and I cannot possibly do the action justice by describing it in my horribly monotone voice. If you're watching this, I hope you already have a general recollection of these fights. So we've seen Usopp fight before, but never quite like this, where he has seniority over his partner, he can't wiggle his way out of the situation if he wanted to, and his life is so directly on the line. I think he gets to use his skills well here, and teaming him up with Chopper was a smart move, since Chopper easily falls for Usopp's self-aggrandizing lies at this point in the series. This also helps to hype up Usopp's big hammer moment, with Chopper amazed by Usopp's skills. The sequence where Usopp is so caught up in his own lie that he begins just blatantly bragging about the fake 5-ton hammer to Chopper, who each time just screams "awesome," is a great beat between these two characters. Although, in other moments throughout this fight, I found myself pretty pissed at Usopp. He goes to abandon Chopper at least twice throughout. The second time after the agent survived a massive explosion, and the only reason Usopp sticks around is because he's caught by Miss Merry Christmas. Usopp does choose to fight a couple times here too, but at this point he still can't fully fight back against his own cowardice. However, once Usopp hears Miss Merry Christmas say that Luffy is dead, and then go on to mock his dream, Usopp snaps. I love how Usopp is getting character development in this fight, which is also imparting life lessons onto Chopper, which will shape his own development. This again reinforces that kid brother element that Chopper's got going on. After Usopp gets utterly fucked up, he says he can't stop fighting when someone laughs at his friend's true dream. He knows that Luffy isn't dead because he knows he will be the king of the pirates. This inspires Chopper to go apeshit, and they are the first to defeat their Baroque Works counterparts. I really adore this fight, which is even more impressive because I genuinely think Miss Merry Christmas is one of the most annoying characters in the whole show, and Mr. 4 couldn't be more boring. Next up, the battle between Sanji and Mr. 2. Honestly, not much to analyze here. I thought it was cool that Sanji got to fight another leg guy. The fight pacing is pretty good, and the interactions between the characters is fun, but there's nothing really new that we learn about either of them. The fight pretty much boils down to classic Sanji is a simp jokes, and then ends with him defeating Mr. 2. Good fight with no real story. Following this, we get Nami versus Miss Doublefinger, and I really appreciate what this fight does for the series, and by that I mean, I really like how the girl of the group actually fights her own battle to the death by herself. Before I got to this fight, I honestly never really expected this to be a situation Nami was put in, but I'm glad that she was, because it keeps her from becoming entirely useless during the action scenes like she had been up to this point. Nami even calls herself a non-combatant before being chased by Mr. 1 and Miss Doublefinger, but then when she steps up to fight, she reminds the audience that she's been stealing from pirates for years and isn't a normal girl, which is exactly what I'd been thinking the whole time, and I was so confused as to why she wasn't fighting. Don't misinterpret me, Nami obviously fought some goons in the past, but never a real villain or even major henchman, so this was a big move for the series to make. I was worried she'd end up more in a Bulma role, a non-combatant who helps in the background, but that role doesn't quite work if you're a member of a pirate crew, and it was awesome to see her kick some ass. Quick tidbit about the other arc from the East Blue that I didn't cover, Arlong Park. That seems to be everyone's favorite arc from the first saga, but the reason it doesn't resonate with me so much is because the entire arc is about Nami, and then she gets totally sidelined in the final fight. It's a great arc, don't get me wrong, and I wasn't expecting Nami to beat Arlong in hand-to-hand combat, but she gets this grand entrance to the fight and then literally just stands there the whole time after and doesn't help anyone do anything. That's my biggest criticism of that arc, and it's also why it just doesn't make it to the top of my list for that saga. It's like if Sanji or Usopp didn't participate at all in any fight in their introductory arcs, with their sad shonen backstory being told. It just felt like a big letdown, and I was nervous that meant the show would be too scared to actually have its ladies fight, but this arc eliminated those fears. So the story of this fight is that Nami had asked Usopp to design a weapon for her so that she can hold her own in a fight. I really like the bond between Usopp and Nami displayed in the scene, being the only two normal-ish people on the crew, but still wanting to contribute. I also like how Usopp doesn't respond when Nami says that they're both not like the others. He isn't willing to admit the obvious fact because of his pride. but he agrees to make a weapon for her. That weapon is the Climatact, a weapon similar to the pole she used in earlier arcs, but capable of generating different elemental attacks which can be combined to make them even more powerful. I mean, the weapon pretty much makes no sense, but I really like it for Nami. It's unique and still requires her to strategize, which showcases her intelligence in battle and automatically gives her that underdog sensation someone like Zoro or Sanji can never really have in a fight because of how they're positioned in the crew. Obviously, if you remember this fight, you remember that things don't go quite as planned with the Climatact at first. I still don't really get why the hell Usopp included so many party tricks in the weapon Nami asked for, but it made for decent gags and a wonderful finishing move which takes out Miss Doublefinger. The final fight is Zoro versus Mr. One, and this fight falls somewhere between the Nami fight and Sanji fight. It's one that isn't too interesting to rewatch, but it also serves to give Zoro an upgrade. Since Mr. One ate the Dice fruit, his body can turn into steel blades, so Zoro has to learn how to cut through steel during this fight in order to win. Zoro continues the trend of taking an inhuman amount of damage to the point where I'm not even sure if he can be killed by anything anymore. But, while near death, he learns how to attune himself to the rhythm of things, and that's how he learns how to both not cut anything at all, and to also cut through steel. He slices through Mr. One and then collapses from his own injuries. The Baroque Works agents are down, and the Straw Hats are victorious. All that's left now is Crocodile. So going on in the background of all these fights has been Vivi's struggle to stop the fighting. Vivi makes her way to the palace and tells everyone to blow it up to stop the battle, and of course, just as this is about to happen, Crocodile and Miss All Sunday show up with King Cobra and stop the detonation. Crocodile elaborates on his evil scheme here, as all good Bond villains do, and we find out he's going to blow up the square where all the fighting is taking place in 30 minutes. We also get our first real look at what Crocodile and Miss All Sunday are after. A poneglyph hidden somewhere in the city which supposedly tells where Pluton, an extraordinarily powerful ancient weapon, is hidden. But right then, Koza shows up and is like, what? Then he and Vivi go to stop the fighting, and as he's about to explain everything to his men, he is shot by a Baroque Works goon who had infiltrated the royal army. This entire scene is such a gut punch, and once again, Vivi has to come up with another desperate plan to save everyone, but Crocodile grabs her, mocks her idealism, and throws her over a ledge. Only for Luffy to come flying in on Pell's back and save her. He's back, bitches, and he's filled with meat. So from here, Vivi and the rest of the Straw Hats go off to try and stop the explosion, while Luffy stays back to fight Crocodile. This time armed with some kind of water barrel hose thing on his back, because he figured out in their previous fight that when Crocodile gets wet, he can't turn into sand, and thus, that's how he can be hurt. Luffy, of course, delivers a fucking rock-hard punch to this guy's smug face, and their battle continues. I really like this beat for Luffy. It's nice seeing him actually using his brain. His ability to hurt Crocodile stuns the king, definitely gets under Crocodile's skin, and he even manages to amuse Miss All Sunday when he becomes a giant water balloon boy. Crocodile isn't going down like this though, and after Miss All Sunday leaves with the king to find the poneglyph, Crocodile begins drying out everything touching the ground, crumbling it all into sand. This leads to Luffy's second defeat at the hands of Crocodile, which creates another incredible image, and has Luffy using his brain again when he spits out the water bullets. Crocodile leaves Luffy's withered body to die, but the water bullets he shot come down and land on him, thus rehydrating his practically dead body. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats and Vivi have been desperately running around the city, searching for the cannon that is going to fire at the town square. Vivi figures it is in the clock tower, and everyone reconvenes there. Pell is shot down by Miss Father's Day, who is a frog woman for some reason, and it's revealed that she and Mr. Seven are operating the cannon. We get a nice joke about Zoro's horrible sense of direction, confusing up with north, but the situation is set that Nami has a plan to get Vivi to the top in the remaining 15 seconds or whatever crazy anime timing they have left. The crew all launch Vivi up the clock tower from their various levels, and Vivi is able to stop the fuse on the cannon, but of course, it's revealed the cannonball has a timer on it, set to go off a couple dozen seconds later, and all seems lost. This is when Pell arrives. He says goodbye to his princess, we get quick flashbacks of his relationship with Vivi when she was a child, and he flies off into the sky with the bomb in his grasp. The only sound we hear is the timer ticking and the vow he took to protect this land, then the bomb explodes in a massive burst of light. The two sides of the war recover from the explosion, pick up their weapons, and begin to kill each other once again like nothing ever happened. In this truly heart-wrenching scene, where Vivi has done everything that she can to stop the fighting, she stares down from the clock tower at her people killing each other over a lie, and shouts over and over again, but no one can hear her, and the death continues. This brings me to the final fight between Luffy and Crocodile in the crumbling tomb. I think here is also a good place to discuss my thoughts on the theme of this arc. I struggle to claim that there is a singular theme that stretches throughout all the actions of the saga, or even this arc. Instead, I think what I'm going to talk about more so applies to Luffy, Vivi, Koza, and Crocodile. I think the entire arc is a battle about trust and friendship, with Luffy and Crocodile representing opposite ends of the spectrum. Crocodile doesn't trust anyone or anything. He built up an entire organization around secrecy where no one knows each other's true names. Each interaction he has with anyone always results in him mocking their beliefs. Crocodile repeatedly mocks Vivi's idealism. On his way to follow Robin, he stops to mock Dashigi's justice, and he even states to Nico Robin that he never trusted her, nor anyone from the beginning, before stabbing her through the chest. Luffy, on the other hand, trusts his crew the whole way through to protect both Vivi and Alabasta while he handles Crocodile. In their final confrontation, Crocodile tells Luffy he's better off ditching a friend or two in order to avoid life-threatening situations like this, and Luffy responds that Crocodile doesn't get it. He says that Vivi doesn't want anyone to die, but she's the first to lay down her own life to protect them, and because Crocodile will kill her if he doesn't help her, that's why he fights, simply because that's how friends are. Crocodile is stunned by this. He asks, even if you guys end up dying, and Luffy says, if we die, we die. These two are diametrically opposed, and in the middle is Koza, whose entire arc is learning not to harbor suspicions just like his father Todo always said. Koza let his paranoia over his perception of the king's wickedness infect his mind, resulting in him being easily manipulated by Crocodile into leading this rebellion. If Koza had taken his father's advice and learned not to be so suspicious, then things wouldn't have gotten this bad. He just needed to have a little more faith like Todo had in the coming rain, like Luffy had in his friends, and like Vivi had in her people. From here, Luffy kicks Crocodile's smug ass through the bedrock beneath the city and launches him into the air. An injured Koza struggles to stop the warring armies, but it isn't until a drop of rain falls onto the ground that the armies cease their fighting long enough for Vivi's pleas to finally be heard by her people. Then Igarum shows up because he's somehow alive for some reason and pretty much sucks all the glory out of the scene from Vivi. How is he alive? Why?
I don't know.
But then the king strolls up, having been pulled out of the temple by Luffy, and gives a rousing speech about forgiveness and moving forward. Then the war is over and the day is saved. With their victory secured, the Straw Hats all pass out from exhaustion in an abandoned alleyway. Luffy is knocked out for 3 days due to his injuries, but when he recovers, the king throws the Straw Hats a dinner, and I have to say that I love this scene. It begins with everyone eating and being loud and obnoxious, with the royal guards looking on the scene with disgust and wondering why Vivi seems to be enjoying herself with these uncouth pirates. And then there's the quickest time-lapse ever, which shows the guards go from disgusted to downright cracking up as we see everyone partying in the dining hall. It's a great little moment that represents the kind of joy this crew brings with it wherever they go when given the chance. They never leave anywhere without making friends. This is further cemented by their final interaction with Mr. 2, who has saved the Going Merry from marine capture for them. Upon finding out that the Straw Hats are willing to face the Marines in order to go back to their friend, he sacrifices himself in a blaze of heartbreaking romantic glory to give the Straw Hats time to escape. Why does this scene give me chills? Why do I like Bon Clay so much? He represents something to me in the show that I can't quite pinpoint, but I feel like I'm on the same wavelength as him whenever he's with the crew. Finally, when the Straw Hats arrive at their meeting point with Vivi, Vivi makes the choice to stay with her people to help rebuild, despite her desire to go with them on more adventures. She asks if they can still be friends, even if they don't see each other for a long time, and Luffy goes to respond, but the crew realizes that if the Marines hear them shout back their friendship to Vivi, she'd be deemed a criminal by the world government. So instead, the crew turn their backs on Vivi, and they all display the markings on their forearms, the sign of their friendship, and a final act of farewell. This is where the story of the Alabasta saga ends. Of course, we have Nico Robin stowing aboard the Going Merry and joining the crew, but there will be plenty of time to talk about her in the future. I'll briefly, I promise briefly, give my final thoughts on this saga overall. I think that this first saga through the Grand Line had a lot of pressure on it. If this fell flat on its face, I don't think the series would have ever recovered, honestly. Luckily, this saga provides everything and more one could have expected from what was set up in the East Blue. The mystery and wonder of the Grand Line is on full display. The threat of death was around every corner, and right away, the Straw Hats go up against one of the 7 warlords of the sea and his army of cronies, and come out the other side victorious, resulting in their increased notoriety with the world government. It also delivers an emotional and tragic story with an upbeat ending, which solidifies to the audience why it is we should care about the Straw Hat Pirates specifically. After this saga, it's clear that their path through the Grand Line will leave a massive impact on all they come across. It's just like Smoker said, whether Alabasta falls or whether it survives, the dawn of a brand new age is on the horizon. That's what this saga does for One Piece. It marks the beginning of a brand new age for this world, and you can feel it. Well, with all that said, I can finally shut my fat mouth. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Alabasta saga. Which is your favorite arc? What is your favorite fight? Let me know all this down below. I will be covering the next saga, Skypiea, 2 months from now. I need a break, these take a lot out of me. But if you want to stick around and check out what else I have to offer on this channel, some of the videos on your screen may be a good starting place. I want to thank all of you who made it this far into the video. You're absolutely insane, but I love you. If you made it here, please leave an X in the comment section to symbolize our friendship. And until the next time, I'll shut up.